Hi, my name is Bruce Ogilvie, and I'll be demonstrating today the proper technique for mixing and dispensing Colores Epoxy Resin. Colores Epoxy Resin consists of two components. The first component is a colored resin. The second component is a hardener. We're going to combine these two components together to form a liquid compound that then I am going to apply onto the surface of these jewelry findings. So the procedure that I'm following is I'm going to measure out first the colored resin, making sure that all the pigments are evenly dispersed into the resin before I use it. And then I'm going to measure using my graduated measuring cup 15 cc's total volume consisting of 10 cc's of resin and 5 cc's of hardener. Okay, that's my 10 cc's of colored resin. And then I'm going to add the hardener, 5 cc's. Once I have these two components in the mixing jar, the next step is to combine them. You want to avoid a rapid stirring action, as that makes a lot of bubbles in your mixture. What I like to ask is just simply to fold the resin and hardener together using a gentle swirling motion with the stick. Nothing aggressive. And the object here is just to simply have the resin and hardener introduced to each other to form a uniform mixture. Approximate time on this is around 30 seconds to 45 seconds if it's done properly. Now, if you notice that you are getting small air bubbles in the mixture, don't worry about that. There is an air release agent that is built in the system that will allow those bubbles to come up and pop on the surface before the resin cures. The goal here is to avoid an over-agitated mixture with too much air that we can't overcome. So again, the goal is to try to make sure that the mixture is uniform in consistency. I don't have a pocket of resin or hardener that has not been integrated. And the final consistency of this mixture is going to be something similar to maple syrup. Now, once I have the mixture completely done the way I'd like it, I'm going to transfer it to a squeeze bottle. I'm then going to apply a needle cap, and I'm going to choose a needle for the application. This case I'm using the pink needle, which is the largest opening. The proper application technique for Colores is to outline the area that you want to decorate first and then fill back to the middle. And what this does is this helps eliminate any air bubbles that might form in the corners or in the pockets of the piece that you're decorating. So again, using that technique, the first step is to outline the perimeter. And then using a back and forth motion, very similar to crayon coloring, just simply move the needle slowly through the resin as you squeeze the bottle and extrude the Colores epoxy onto the finding. Now, this back and forth method does two things. It ensures a good bonding of the Colores epoxy down to the surface of the finding. It will also help relieve any air that might be trapped either in the resin or lurking in the corners. Okay, the next step in the process is to cure the epoxy. You have two choices. One is to let the product cure at room temperature, which is 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Simply set the product aside in a dust-free environment. You can come back in 24 hours and check it for cure. It should be dry to the touch in 24 hours, but it takes 72 hours to completely cure at room temperature. The other option is to heat cure the resin. We recommend a maximum temperature of 130 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours. Once the 2 hours has elapsed, the resin is completely cured and the pieces can be cooled and they're ready to use or wear. We recommend a toaster oven or a heat lamp for this process, but we also recommend not exceeding 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperatures higher than that will cause the resin to blister or peel, resulting in damaged product. The Colores Epoxy Kit comes with 2 hardeners, a thin and a thick. Deciding which of these hardeners to choose depends on the item that you're decorating. In this particular case, the piece that I'm holding has a recessed cavity. This is a good application for the thin hardener. Because I have a contained area, the resin was simply going to lay in that void. I don't have to worry about any curves or any modulation. However, if I'm decorating a piece such as this, where I have no recessed area and I have no borders, I would elect to use the thick hardener. The thick hardener will give me an increased viscosity of mixture, which will allow me to decorate the perimeter of this item without having the resin run off and form a pool. I've made a new batch of resin using the thick hardener to demonstrate the use of the additive that comes in the Colores kit. The additive is designed to increase viscosity or thickness of mixture to allow application to modulated pieces, as I showed before. If you have a highly modulated piece, you might need to add a little bit extra additive to control the viscosity and to control the flow of the resin. When using the additive, you always want to make sure that you have your colored resin and hardener pre-mixed in your mixing cup, and simply take the additive and in 1-drop increments, drop right into the middle of the mixture, and then slowly stir to integrate the drop additive into the mixture. This will increase the viscosity in increments. So if you've decided that you want it a little bit thicker, you can simply add another drop of hardener. Our recommendation is to go no more than 3 drops per batch. And again, just a nice slow integration of the additive hardener into your mixture. I've pre-mixed yellow and blue, and I'm going to use both of these colors to decorate this finding in front of me. So following the protocol, the first step is to outline the area that I'm going to decorate. And then fill back to the middle. And now what I'm going to do is introduce blue onto the surface of the yellow to create a pattern. When using Colores Epoxy Resin, the only problems you're likely to encounter are 2. The most obvious one is overfilling. If the resin runs out of the object that you're coloring, chances are you simply applied too much resin. You can wipe that area clean with a cloth or towel, removing the resin, and refill it with fresh batch. The other problem you're likely to encounter are bubbles. Bubbles are usually a byproduct of aggressive mixing in the initial stages, causing the bubbles to be in the mixture, so when you apply them, they want to reside on the surface of the piece you're decorating. If you have clusters of bubbles forming a froth on top of your mixture, chances are you've mixed the resin too cold. In other words, it's not at room temperature. Perhaps it's around 50 degrees, 55 degrees Fahrenheit. The solution to that problem is to warm the resin up to room temperature and remix the batch. If you have half-broken bubbles or rough surfaces, it's an indication of curing at too high of a temperature. What's happened is the resin has tried to cure, the air bubbles have tried to pop, and the air bubbles have not allowed themselves to resurface. If this is the case, reduce the curing temperature as recommended to 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and that will cure that problem. If you have bubbles in your mixture as you apply, and they are in the surface or on the surface of the item you're decorating, you have two choices. You can either pick the bubbles out using a needle or a pin, dragging them up to the surface where they will pop and the resin will resurface itself, or you can apply a small amount of carbon dioxide to the surface of the item you're decorating, which will cause the bubbles to pop. You can get carbon dioxide a couple of different ways. You can exhale your breath onto the item, or you can take a small torch and wave the torch across the top of the item, allowing the carbon dioxide from the combusting flame to fall down on the surface and cause the bubbles to pop. Those are the most common problems that you're going to encounter with Colores Epoxy Resin. Okay, I'm going to be demonstrating air bubble problems, and I'm going to be using a gross opening on the needle tip applicator without a needle to make this quick. Okay, it's obvious from looking at this piece I have a tremendous amount of air trapped in this mixture. That came from over-aggressive mixing, and if you see these types of air bubbles, it came from that. Now the way to get these air bubbles out is simply to either let this piece sit. Over time, the air bubbles will migrate up to the surface, they will pop, and the resin will re-level itself. You can also take the needle tip and simply agitate the resin to bring those air bubbles up to the surface to allow them to pop and to accelerate that natural process. If you happen to spill the resin on the working surface, or if you need to clean off your tools, I recommend a little bit of isopropyl alcohol on a paper towel. This is good for reusing bottles, needles, cleaning up your work surface. Just a small amount of alcohol will help keep your workspace clean and keep you from transferring the epoxy to your clothing or to other work surfaces. The isopropyl alcohol will not dissolve the epoxy, but it will clean it and allow you to reuse some of these implements for 2 and 3 occasions. You can also reuse your bottles by taking the surplus resin that you haven't used and dumping it out to a suitable container. And then by adding a small quantity of isopropyl alcohol, and reattaching the needle cap, swirling this around to make sure you have good coverage, and then you can simply squirt the alcohol back out through the needle cap, disassemble this, pour out the extra alcohol, and now what will happen is when I come back tomorrow, the alcohol will have evaporated, the resin will have cured, and I'll have a very thin film of resin on the inside of the bottle. All I need to do is simply squeeze the bottle to crack off the resin, drop out the dried pieces, and I can reuse the bottle. The needle cap's already been purged, so I can attach a fresh needle to that, or I can reuse the needle that I just cleaned. Also, if you're going to be eating or using the bathroom after using Colores Epoxy Resin, we highly recommend washing your hands. And obviously, we try to encourage you not to smoke while using Colores Epoxy Resin. Colores Epoxy Resins are a fun, easy-to-use product. They'll allow you to put color and decorative elements on many of your designs. Thank you for your time. Enjoy your Colores Epoxy Resin.